everybody. Glad you could join us this early on a Sunday morning. Now, we're going to be discussing three things today. We're going to go over the game from yesterday, our reactions. Are they warranted? And then we're going to talk about, should we trade for Adam Thielen? We're going to start the debate. And then finally, we're going to look at the long-term position groups for the running backs and the quarterbacks. And with yesterday's performance, a young Mr. Max Brosmer may be making a case for himself. We'll check it all out next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey, everybody, I want to welcome you to the chat. I see Dan, Julian, Peter, Raymond, Dalton, of course, is checking out the big round bellies with me, and Razzie and Kelly. Welcome to the show. And yes, we're not at the normal time. Why is that, Mr. Darren?
Dave says with a hint of disgust. Well, it's that time of the year. I got a plane to catch today, vacation time for me and the family. So the next 3 weeks is going to be like a bit topsy-turvy for two old bloggers as far as whether we're on Saturday or Sunday and what time we're on. I apologize for the early wake-up call. Although for some of you, maybe it gets you watching the show before church. I don't know. Like maybe it worked out well that way. But apologies if we got you up. But we're glad that you're here if you did get up to watch us.
Yes. And remember, when we go to regular season, we will be at a 10 o'clock time period on Saturdays instead of Sundays. So we'll migrate there. Now, let's get into it. We're going to talk about first, in theme one, the game. And here we go. Oh. Our reaction, how did it go?
Well, we made it, folks. It was a long, 9 months or so with no Vikings football. We finally got yesterday some sort of real Vikings football. So we made it. It's here. 2 more preseason games to go, and then the real stuff starts on September the 8th or 9th with the Bears. So congratulations to everybody, including me and Dave. It's been a long haul. But yeah, yesterday's game, put it in quotation marks. Like I said, sort of real football. Vikings won. Ray, rah. Pretty, I think, boring game overall. But not a whole lot to be excited about, I think. But there was some excitement, certainly. And that main excitement was centered around the guy in the picture here, J.J. McCarthy, who was stepping onto the field to play sort of real football snaps for the first time. I think it was in 364 days. He took snaps yesterday, a day before last year's debut as a rookie, which was all we got to see of him. So, how J.J. McCarthy is doing, how he's looking in practices, joint practices, OTAs, and preseason games, end games, that's going to be the main topic of conversation amongst media and Vikings fans for the entire season and probably next year too. So, of course, we want to, how did he look? Well, here's my thoughts on it. I think it was overall, nothing spectacular, but I think it was a solid outing for him. The good things for me was that the offense didn't go 3 and out. Now, Houston didn't have any of their very few of their starters in there. Daniil Hunter wasn't there. Will Anderson wasn't there. Stingley wasn't there, that sort of stuff. So you've got to take that into consideration. And we were missing some key guys too on offense. But I think, he led a 13 play. I think it was a 13 play
14.
Scoring 14, but he wasn't on the field for the 14th play, which was the kick.
True.
The kick field. Yeah. But it was a 14-play drive. He led it. They got a field goal, so they took a lot of time off the clock. They moved the ball down the field. Northfius, yeah. My apologies, Northfius. But once we get over these 3 weeks, we will be on schedule, I promise. But yeah, I think, he made a nice, pretty good throw under duress to Jordan Addison that, picked up a big gain, that sliding catch by Addison. I thought he was off target a couple of times, not great ball placement on a couple of throws, but his receivers, including Addison, came up with the catch. He made a nice scramble on a 4th and 4. I think he recognized that the Texans were in man coverage. He recognized that he could make an easy little move to escape the blitzer. So he made that easily, an 8-yard run on a 4th and 4. That's good to see. He did miss that throw to Lucky Jackson between the numbers down the middle of the field. There was talk, Pete Burchett said during the telecast, he wasn't sure whether Jackson cut the route off a little bit earlier than McCarthy was expecting, or McCarthy overthrew it. It looked like an overthrow to me. Not a big deal, Dave. But on the other hand, that is a throw that quarterbacks like McCarthy, if you want to be a quarterback in the NFL and be a good one, you've got to make that over and over and over and over again. And that would have been an easy first down, a big gain that McCarthy didn't hook up with Lucky Jackson on. So, again, not a big deal, but something to keep in mind. Again, I think it was a solid performance. He didn't put the ball in harm's way at all, I felt. Showed good zip on the ball. The ball placement and accuracy could have been a little better. But again, 13-play drive. They kicked a field goal. I think it's something to build on for McCarthy because training camp has been a bit uneven the past 7 to 8 days for him. I thought he looked, and he didn't take a sack, no turnovers. Again, solid. I think something to build on. And now can he build on it in the joint practices this week against the Patriots? Because he ain't going to play against the Patriots in the preseason game, and he ain't going to play against the Titans in the final game. That's the last we're going to see of J.J. McCarthy on the field in this preseason, I think.
And you're 100% correct. I thought he made smart moves. His decision-making, his leadership was locked on. Now, he did mention after the game in an interview in his post-game that going up against Flores' defense has got him sped up so fast that was actually a little too fast on the field for specifically that Lucky Jackson throw. And he's got to slow down. All right, now this is a first I've heard from a quarterback. We'll see how it goes. I think he did fine. We had 3 third-down conversions and a 4th-down conversion, and the whole decision to run when O'Neal sealed in the edge rusher, I thought was brilliant. That's a no-brainer because he left open all that green, and he said, easy money, I'm going to take it. Got the first down. That was it.
No sense throwing that one in the air and, the receiver drops it. We can run 8 yards and get the first down and keep the chains moving.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yes, Northfius and JJ could have walked on water and the haters would still hate. Yeah. They bitch about that he couldn't swim. That is true. And they were out in force last night. And it's like, come on, guys. It's preseason, week 1. We're looking for decision-making. We're looking for, is he on schedule? Is he getting everybody in and out of the huddle? All that sort of stuff. And it was fine. It was good. I'm not at all displeased with him.
Yeah, and it's one drive. He's not going to be able to pile up a volume of stats that make it, it wasn't, McCarthy didn't go 9 for 10 and throw 2 touchdowns like Joe Burrow did a couple of days earlier against the Eagles. Mm-hmm. But that's Joe Burrow, who's going into his 5th year in the league and can do that stuff in preseason with his blindfold on.
And he was doing that with his favorite receiver as well.
Yes.
JJ's didn't have his favorite receiver out there yesterday.
He did not. So yeah, again, one series. Certainly, if they'd gone 3-and-out, he would have been out there again. But like you said, Dave, I think there's, and you mentioned the thing about getting in and out of the huddle, and that looked crisp to me. There was no typical preseason confusion, and you call a timeout or you get a delay of game penalty. And that was the case for all of the Vikings quarterbacks, which we're going to talk about here as well, besides JJ McCarthy. But we know everybody wants to weigh in on JJ McCarthy, so we are too. I think, moving past that, of course, Sam Howell, let's talk about him, because by everything that most of everything we've heard in training camp, he has been hot garbage at this time, and it's led to us as well talking about how long are the Vikings going to put up with Howell getting sacked, not completing passes consistently, throwing interceptions. Well, yesterday I thought he was probably the best of the four quarterbacks that were in the game. Again, looked like he really knew the offense. The huddle was running crisp. He did have that fumbled snap, which may have been Jurgensen's issue, not his. I guess that's been an issue throughout training camp. But, that arm talent that we've heard, you saw that. Particularly there was that one pass. It wasn't a long pass. He got it. He placed it really well with zip between the linebacker dropping and before the cornerback could close on Lucky Jackson. I thought you and I talked about that throw during the game day, how that was a really nice throw. But again, he went 10 for 11, led a touchdown drive, didn't get sacked, and we knew he had a good arm, but the decision-making has always been the question with Howell. I thought he made good decisions in this game and put the ball in places where, again, it wasn't in harm's way. So I think he needed a really good performance to get his confidence up, and to get, I think, the Vikings coaches' confidence up that he can be a quality backup if the Vikings need him to come into a game. And I thought yesterday he quieted some concerns with his play. Now he's got to build on it because he's going to play a fair bit in at least the next game. But I thought a really good performance for him, and perhaps we don't have to worry about the backup position, but time will tell.
Right. And you got to remember, during camp, he goes usually against the ones.
Mm-hmm.
And Flores's ones are brutal. And that may be why he looks like hot garbage during training camp. And we'll see. And hopefully every other quarterback that faces him, the ones, will also look like hot garbage as we move into the season. But we'll find out. But he wasn't the only quarterback that was out there yesterday.
No, he wasn't. I was really impressed with Max Brosmer, the former Golden Gopher, yesterday. And now, having seen him, I never watched him play for the Gophers. Certainly didn't watch him play when he was at New Hampshire the 5 years previous. But Anthony, but yesterday I could see why the Vikings beat writers had been saying how he looked good in OTAs and in training camp when he got brought in by the Vikings as an undrafted rookie free agent, because, much like Sam Howell as well, I think he looked pretty crisp in there as far as getting the team in and out of the huddle. He made quick decisions. I think in the most case, they were the good decisions. Did he check down a little bit quickly on a couple of plays? Perhaps, but that's just my opinion on that. But his ball, it's got very good zip on it, Dave. Again, I've never seen him play. He looked like he really put something on the ball. Maybe not Dan Marino kind of arm strength, but still plenty good to play in the NFL. And again, he moved the team down the field, got a touchdown, overcame a drop pass at the goal line that should have been a touchdown. And then on fourth down, rifles one down the middle to Miles Price at the back of the end zone. Again, he looked like he belonged. And I think if you're Brett Rypien, who yesterday did not have such a good game, although he did have one really nice pass that Deshaun Jones dropped, that would have made things better. But if you're Brett Rypien, you're probably a little bit worried about your spot on the roster based on how things went yesterday with Brosmer and how things went with you. But, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but if you're looking for, again, I thought very encouraged by what I saw from Brosmer, and he's going to play a fair bit in the next two games, and we'll have a chance to see whether he can, again, build on what happened yesterday and show that he was even better, that he's improved, and that he really is somebody that we can look at as a potential long-term development option at quarterback for the Vikings, which we have not had or been able to find in quite some time. I think a guy that we can stick on the roster, doesn't have to play right away, but has the promise to build into something better in a year or 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So that's the quarterback stuff. I think that, which is what everybody wants to talk about. I think that there's been other mentions. I think on offense, the other things that kind of stood out for me were okay, not a huge deal, but the running back 3 competition. It is a real competition, as we heard in training camp. I think Ty Chandler and Zavier Scott got a lot of work yesterday, and I think Zavier Scott really made the most of his time in there, ran the ball decisively, showed some pretty good burst and wiggle, nice hands, showed some toughness running, and in the one catch he had, pass block pretty well. So he really helped himself yesterday. And as, again, the beat writers have been saying, they said, watch out for this guy. We've heard a few beat writers talk about this. Watch out for this guy. He may steal the roster spot from Ty Chandler. I thought Chandler played fine yesterday. The 5 carries for 5 yards doesn't look great, but he didn't have a whole lot of holes to run through, whereas I thought the offensive line that Scott played with gave him a lot more daylight to run through, which helped. But still, pretty nice start for Zavier Scott. Still a long way to go for both of these guys, though. You've got another 2 to 3 weeks, and how they do in the next 2 games in particular, and the joint practices, depending on how many snaps they get and reps they get, is going to determine who makes the team. Both aren't, but Zavier Scott, again, looked pretty good yesterday. And is, again, not because I felt Ty Chandler looked terrible, but certainly Scott, when you look at his stats and some of the runs he had and what he did on the one pass catch, I think, very encouraging for him.
Delton, I didn't realize Zavier Scott's 29 years old. I know he's a vet, but he stood out to me yesterday, big time.
I don't think Scott is 29. I believe
we'll get into it later.
He's
26,
according
26.
to my.
Okay.
Yeah, according to what I checked on ESPN and anyway last week, but that's something there. The tight end 3 competition again, who's going to take the Johnny Montroe? We got no clarity on that yesterday. Ben Urasek didn't catch a pass. I don't think he had one thrown to him. Giovanni Ricci was not targeted. He did play. Same thing for Nick Van Nett. The only guy who caught passes was this guy, Bryson Nesbitt, who looked fine, but he's not probably your tight end 3 because he's really a oversized wide receiver who's playing tight end. You can see he's pretty thin by tight end standards. He's a pass catcher. That's what he does. I don't think the Vikings are keeping Nesbitt on the roster, the 53. I think they want a guy who can be a better blocker. And I don't think that Nesbitt is that guy. So a lot to be determined for the tight end number 3 position right now over the rest of training camp, joint practices, and the 2 preseason games left. And it could be that tight end number 3 is not on the Vikings roster right now, based on what we saw yesterday, which wasn't much. I think, as far as other things go, Dave, I think Delton was talking about Walter Rouse in the comments very early in the show. For you, I'm sure you were eyeballing Donovan Jackson while he was in the game. I did notice one rep where he got pushed back pretty badly, but I didn't really pay attention. Yeah, I didn't really pay much attention. Yeah, I didn't pay much attention to it beyond that, other than the pass protection for the most part throughout the game was, I thought, pretty solid. And no false start penalty, not very many false start penalties that I can remember. There might have been one, not a whole lot of holding, that sort of stuff. It was a pretty penalty-free game for the offensive line. So that's that. A few other things, not really on offense, but wide receiver-wise, I think Lucky Jackson looked pretty good yesterday. He made a tough contested catch on one. He caught 3 passes for 30 yards. They had him in there with the starters at the beginning of the game. The question is, I think he's got a good shot to make the team. The question is, do you trust him to play snaps in a real NFL game when it all gets real in a few weeks? I don't know, but he certainly helped himself yesterday and did what we've been reading about throughout training camp, and that he's been one of the guys that's been really noticeable amongst the wide receivers who aren't named Addison, Naylor, and Justin Jefferson. I think one of the issues, of course, is the Rondale Moore injury. Looks like KOC said he got a very significant knee injury. It looked like the left knee, which is it was the right knee that he shredded last year. So really terrible luck for Rondale Moore. And he was a guy who you were looking at as potentially your number 3 wide receiver while Jordan Addison is suspended. Well, that's out the door now. So who's it going to be?
We'll discuss if it's not the next theme, but yeah.
Yes. That's a question.
I just looked. There's no report on what are the results of his MRI yet today.
No.
And we'll see how it goes.
When you look at, other things that were defensively, I think when we'll switch to that, clearly Gabe Murphy was the big winner yesterday amongst the defensive players. A sack and a half. They could have probably credited him with both sacks. He had 5 quarterback hits, according to the stats I saw, 4 quarterback pressures. He played a lot. He was noticeable a lot. He made a nice tackle on special teams on a punt or on a kickoff or punt return, I believe. This is the way that backups make the roster, by doing the things that Gabe Murphy did yesterday. Noticeable, make impact plays. He was relentless. This is the guy that we thought we were going to see last year in the preseason, but he got hurt and he never got to play. So I think that Murphy, unless he gets injured, I think he's clearly your edge rusher number 4. And I think that Bo Richter, who was credited with a half a sack and was pretty noticeable too yesterday as far as rushing the passer, he'd be your edge rusher number 5. Do they keep 6, Dave? That's the question. We talked about that yesterday during the show, and who might that be? There wasn't a lot of noticeable stuff that Batty did or Chambliss did or anybody else did in that role, but they've got some time to go with that. Along the defensive side of things, again, the other player other than Murphy that was noticeable, at least to me, was Elijiah Williams, the undrafted rookie, number 99 yesterday, if you're wondering what his number was, the undrafted rookie out of Morgan State. We had talked about him when he got signed. He was super productive as far as sacks goes at Morgan State, but it was at Morgan State. Well, yesterday, he could have had a couple of sacks. He just missed on a couple of them. He had 2 tackles, stopping a couple of run plays, noticeable creating pressure, I think, when he was in there. I think he's going to have a tough time making the team, Dave, but that kind of play in the limited amount of snaps that he had is the thing that gets you noticed. Also gets you noticed by other teams in the league if you don't get on the roster. And the other thing was that
Tyler so much. This is his heartthrob for UDFA this season.
Well, I can see why he likes him. I can see why he likes him because, Williams did show up yesterday. Now, he was playing against 3 stringers mostly, but hey, it's better than not doing anything, which is kind of what we saw, I thought, from Levi Drake Rodriguez and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, who were starting. Really didn't do much yesterday. Again, does that concern me? No, but just wanted to point it out. These are the guys that are expected to make the team and are expected to be in the defensive line rotation, and they didn't really cause too much of a problem for the Texans yesterday at all. Jalen Redmond did eventually. He kind of took a little while to get going, but as the game progressed, he started doing those Jalen Redmond things, knifing into the backfield and creating a bit of pressure. But the rookie and the second-year guy, Drake Rodriguez, did not. But so just thought I'd mention that. And, defensively, we know they got 3 interceptions yesterday. I don't want to make a big deal about it because 2 of them were thrown right at the guys, and the other was a tip pass that landed into the, Halusi's lap. So, good that they caught them, but I don't think it's a lot to note. I did note that Mekhi Blackman mostly ran with the second stringers yesterday. Seems pretty clear that right now he's cornerback number 4. And surprisingly, at least to me, it looks like Blackman's role in 2025 could be less than it was as a rookie in 2023, the way things are going. He's going to have to step things up to really earn playing time on the field outside of injury, and we hope there's no more injuries. Yesterday, he got targeted a few times by Braxton Berrios. So I think Mekhi Blackman, yes, he's going to make the team, but he's got some work to do to really get, earn playing time on the field, which I thought he was going to do this year. A Blood Eagle, what did we think about Dallas Turner? I wasn't going to mention him, which probably tells you all you need to know. He wasn't in there a whole lot, right? He didn't do a whole lot while he was in there. I don't think he was even in the full first series of the defensive snaps. And of course, the Vikings defense had some tackling issues there, and the Texans ran right down the field with very little resistance in that one drive. Turner didn't really show me much, but again, I'm not going to take anything out of that because he was only in there a handful of snaps. It did look bigger as advertised, though. So that's a thing. A couple other random thoughts with Will Reichard. It looks like the rumors of Reichard's demise were greatly exaggerated, perhaps by me, because he hit both of his field goals yesterday, both of his points after his PATs. So he's 2 for 2, 4 for 4 on all of his kicks. Look fine. So maybe no issues there. We'll see. But that was good to see that he booted everything right through the uprights, just like last year in preseason and early in preseason. And finally, the punt returner's role, with Moore done for the year, likely, really who's going to be the guy that takes that role. Felton returned some punts yesterday. Silas Bolden returned some punts yesterday. Neither of them really did anything to distinguish themselves in those. So there's an opportunity there for both of those guys to get that job and stay. And Felton's going to make the roster anyway. Bolden, I think, probably not. But it's possible the Vikings have also used in training camp. They've used Jalen Naylor there a bit. There's somebody else that I'm forgetting. I think it's Miles Price has been used a bit, the undrafted rookie free agent. But it's possible the Vikings punt returner is also not on the roster right now. And Matthew Collar kind of floated the Brandon Powell thing yesterday in one of his stories, because Powell's a free agent. He's a dependable punt returner, not a very explosive one, but the Vikings now, I think, have a need at receiver. They're going to have to bring in somebody, I think, to that wide receiver room. Who's it going to be? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But those are my thoughts on the preseason game, Dave, at least individually, how I thought things went. Of course, defensively, offensively, both O'Connell and Brian Flores aren't going to show a whole lot. But Dave, anything that struck you about yesterday and you're watching the Vikings play the Texans?
Well, there were some standouts like we've discussed. I thought Zavier Scott he stood out, as well as Gabriel Murphy. Now, when we get to Mekhi Blackman, I noticed that they were moving him into nickel, which makes me think he's Murphy's backup, basically. He's training to replace Murphy eventually, maybe. Not that Murphy's, locked up for a while. But that's what, to me, it looked like. Did he stand out? No. Was he, basically around the ball? Yeah. Dwight McGlothern I saw quite a few times, never making a great play, but he was always nearby. Delton mentions Logan Brown. I did not see how Logan Brown did. I am looking forward to watching the All-22 specifically to pay attention to my big round bellies. But I thought yesterday was just a good, are we going to go out and execute and win the game? And they went out and executed and won the game. There was nothing flashy, nothing spectacular. Everything seemed to be on time, on schedule. Didn't matter which quarterback was in there. It ran well. And that's a good sign, I think. And we won. Hey, we're 2-0 anytime JJ plays a game. So, hey.
Yeah, just like the regular season is going to be.
Yes. All right. Now on to the great debate. Theme 2. And here we go. Should we trade for this man?
It is a question that was debated this week as when Jordan Addison's 3-game suspension was announced by the NFL last Saturday, I think it was, or might be a little bit off on that. But that became, the thought of what are the Vikings going to do without Addison as your number 2 when you got Justin Jefferson? Yes, we know that Jalen Naylor is going to slide into the number 2 role while Addison is out, but Naylor is a guy who only had 28 catches last year as the number 3 wide receiver. I saw something, Will Raggets posted it, where PFF had him as his drop percentage was 14% or something like that, or 14 point something percent last year, and that was one of the 14th highest, 15th highest amongst wide receivers who had been targeted 170 times, something along those lines. So that isn't great. And I remember a couple of those drops in particular. One was in the Rams game early in the season, near in the red zone, where he dropped one, nobody around him. There was another one. There was a deep ball that Darnold threw him against the Titans that would have been basically a dagger throw, and he dropped that as well. And he's had those issues in training camp. We've heard about him not bringing down contested catches, that sort of thing. So when you think about Naylor ascending to number 2 because Addison isn't there, and then you look at the depth behind him, particularly with Rondale Moore likely done for this season, and maybe he'll never play again, certainly not with the Vikings, it's got people wondering, do the Vikings need to bring in another receiver? There's been some names mentioned, free agent possibilities in the chat. Gabe Davis, Amari Cooper's out there. After that, it gets really, the pickings get really slim though. But it's gotten people talking about, of course, how about we trade and bring back the hometown boy, Adam Thielen, to the Vikings, who of course left in free agency after the 2022 season and has been with Carolina the past 2 seasons and hasn't been doing too badly. So let's talk about that, because there are pros and cons to bringing Thielen on the team, I think. And
now, I want to put out there, this is a hypothetical.
Yes.
We're just discussing, the fans all week have been promoting this. We are talking a hypothetical situation. There's no evidence Carolina wants to trade him. There's no evidence the Vikings want to trade for him. Mm-hmm. We're talking at this for reasons of, would it be a good idea if they did, or would it not be a good idea? Just to make that clear.
Thanks, Dave. That is important to be clear. I think so. Let's look at some of the pros to that. I think the first one is that since Thielen has gone to Carolina, he's still been a productive guy. He caught over 100 balls in 2023 for a very bad team and a quarterback, Bryce Young, who really struggled as a rookie. Last year, he missed 7 games, but he still had over 600, 700 yards in receiving. I think he caught 50 or some balls. In his 2 years in Carolina, he's about 150 some catches, about 1,600 yards he's caught in those 2 seasons. And last year, his yards per catch was, though it wasn't over a full season, was the highest it's been since 2019, because it had been dropping every year since then. So he's shown that even at his age, he's been productive. And he's at an age where a lot of wide receivers really aren't even in the league anymore. So I think that's a pro. He's a veteran. He knows how to get open, and he's been productive the past couple of years. Another thing is that you're looking at a guy who, I think overall, the basic concepts, and even more than that, he's familiar with the Kevin O'Connell offense. He played in it in 2022. Now he hasn't been here for 2 years. Certainly Kevin O'Connell, I'm sure, has added new plays to the playbook. He's taken out plays of the playbook that maybe Thielen ran in 2022. Maybe some of the terminology or verbiage is a bit different than it was in 2022. But I think the basic offense and how it's run and the timing and a lot of the plays are going to be very familiar to Adam Thielen from his time in 2022 at the Vikings. So if you're trading Adam Thielen, you're getting a guy with that familiarity. He's going to, I think, have a quicker time getting acclimated to the offense and getting comfortable in it than if you brought in a wide receiver who has no experience with the Kevin O'Connell offense at all. So it might be quicker for Adam Thielen to get up to speed with the offense and JJ McCarthy than again somebody who has not been in the Kevin O'Connell offense before. I think that's a plus. Another pro is that right now, the Vikings wide receiver room, it's pretty young and untested. A lot of undrafted rookie free agents, guys who have never played a down in a real NFL game. You bring Adam Thielen in, you're getting a guy with a boatload of experience in the NFL and who's played at a very, very high level for much of it. He's also a guy that started at the bottom of the rung and ascended to the top of the tops as far as being a wide receiver. So he's got a lot of experience, I think, to impart on a pretty young wide receiver room. I think you're a team that's in win now mode. Adam Thielen has been on some successful teams. He's a veteran. He's seen a lot. He can provide that veteran leadership, that calm, cool veteran presence that the Vikings might need in the wide receiver room. I think that kind of veteran leadership experience, I think, is always valuable as long as the guy can play. I think it's sort of a pro is that right now his salary cap hit is roughly $10.1 million. Not outrageous. What's that?
It would not be for us. And I did a slide. For us. But if we traded for him, it's 10.1 for
the Panthers.
The Panthers. And they've already paid him his in-game bonuses for this season, which is weird. But that's so they can keep him around.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, here it is. Yes. Let me load it up. He's got a base salary of $6.250, $6.25 million.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly they've already paid him his roster bonuses. That would be it. Maybe a little bit more. It's not that expensive, and we have the cap space right now to absorb that. Now, of course, there's next year in a minus 60, but
that's next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the Vikings, according to Over the Cap, the Vikings salary cap situation right now is somehow they have like $25 million that they can use. So now you always, like you talk about the rainy day fund, Dave, that the Vikings, every NFL team has to keep around in case there's injuries, and you got to bring in a veteran. You got to have that salary cap space to do that. And the Vikings also, as they've had two of the last 3 seasons, they've had to make a trade to acquire a pretty significant veteran to the roster because of injuries. That also eats up your salary cap space to some degree, depending on, again, how much they've already been paid by the team that you traded from them. But you're right. The Vikings can absorb this with Thielen. So that's a good thing. So those are the pros. I think the cons are obviously his age. He'll be 36 on August 22nd. That is way past the best before date of most wide receivers. Again, his yards per catch up until last year. I think he's 36.
No, 35.
Oh, I stand corrected. Still pretty old for a wide receiver. And his yards per catch had been going down up until last season. The year previous, it had been under 10 yards per catch. So, again, when you look at wide receivers, once they get into the 30s, early 30s, they lose a bit of that explosiveness. Are they able to create separation from the younger, stickier cornerbacks? Oftentimes they cannot. Now, we talked about Thielen being productive the past 2 years in Carolina, but it's always possible that at 35, he just he just lost too much of that he falls off a cliff and he just cannot get open at all, or very few. So, that is a concern. I think that's a pro, is his age, being about to turn 35 here in a few days. I think the other pro or con is that even though he has been, as I said, in the KOC offense in 2022, he has been away for 2 years, Dave. And the quarterback now that he'll be catching the balls from would be J.J. McCarthy, not Kirk Cousins, which was in 2022, who he'd been playing with since 2018. So, the con, one of the cons is how quickly, even though Thielen's a veteran who's seen a lot and played with several different quarterbacks, is 3 weeks enough time for him to build the chemistry, the rapport with J.J. McCarthy, so that for the first game against the Bears and the 2 games after that, which Addison won't be available, can Thielen establish that chemistry and be the guy that J.J. McCarthy trusts in that short amount of time? That is a question that I have. The final, I guess, concern or a con would be the Panthers themselves. Like we said, this is hypothetical. There's been no evidence that there's been any talks at all about this. But if you look at the Panthers depth chart, yes, they drafted McMillan from Arizona very early in the draft, and he's probably going to be wide receiver number 1. Yes, they drafted Zavier Leggett, I think last year, out of South Carolina, and he's young, and they're hoping he's going to be wide receiver number 2. But still, Thielen was a guy who has caught well over 100 balls the past 2 years with Bryce Young. Bryce Young looked better after he got benched last year, and Adam Thielen was his number 2 target or number 1 target during that time. If you look at the Panthers depth chart at wide receiver, there isn't a lot there after Thielen. I don't know if the Panthers are all going to be all that keen on trading away a guy like Thielen if they think he's still productive, when he's a veteran who, are they going to take away a weapon from Bryce Young this year at a critical year 3 for Bryce Young? I don't. And would they trade him away for what's likely going to be a late day 3 pick in the draft? I have some questions about that. I also have some questions about how amenable Thielen would be to that, because when he gets to Minnesota and Addison comes back, what is Adam Thielen's role going to be with the Vikings? Does he become wide receiver number 4? I don't think that Adam Thielen, based on all that he's said over the past few years, I don't think Adam Thielen is willing to accept being the number 4 wide receiver for any NFL team right now. I think he wants to play. I think feels he can still play. And I don't know if he'd be too keen on coming to Minnesota if he's just there for a couple of games to play 30 to 40 snaps. And then after Addison comes back, he's a guy who's playing maybe 5 to 10. I don't think that's going to be a happy Adam Thielen, but those are my thoughts. I didn't feel like this was something that I would be on board with before the Rondale Moore injury. With Moore going down, I'm a little bit more open to it, depending on what you'd have to give up. As folks said, there's Amari Cooper out there in free agency. Gabe Davis is out there in free agency. Are they somebody that you could bring in for maybe cost you a little less and can still play just as well as Thielen? Hard to say. Again, they have no experience under Kevin O'Connell in that offense at all, whereas Thielen does. So again, this is very theoretical, but the Vikings, I think, are going to have to do something at wide receiver, because you look at the other guys on the depth chart, whether it's Price, Dante Fleming, Jashawn Jones, even Felton, Tim Jones, the guy from the Jaguars who had a couple of penalties on special teams yesterday, and even special teams is supposed to be where he shines. A lot of questions there about whether you can really trust Lucky Jackson, whether if you need to use them in the game, whether they can get it done. At least Adam Thielen has got it done in the past, and he's got it done pretty well in the past.
All right. Now let me try to convince you.
Yeah, you do that.
Here's Adam Thielen's grades from last year. He is Young's security blanket, without a doubt. Merlin, my Great Dane, has a little stuffed duck that he carries around and suckles all the time. It's his comfort toy. For Young, it's Adam Thielen. And obviously, they've got a whole slew of new young wide receivers, and he's going to mentor them. He's good at that. We know that. As for knowing the KOC system, he's been in it, 2 years ago. As for working with chemistry with J.J. McCarthy, he does it every offseason. He's done it 2 years in a row. Since J.J. was brought to Minnesota, he comes and he throws with him. He helps set that up. So J.J. already knows Adam Thielen. They get along great. I don't think there's a loss there. Now, the question is Adam Thielen, question is, are we in a win now mode? And if we're in a win now mode, do we do everything possible to maximize that win now mode? Or do we just roll with what we've got? Or trade for somebody like Amari Cooper or whomever who has no experience with KOC nor time with J.J. McCarthy. I've heard K.J. Osborne being brought up as a name as well. It's interesting. And Dalton says we don't like Jalen Naylor. Well, Jalen Naylor, he's had an issue this fall during the summer. He's got a lot of dropsies. And if you look at Jalen Naylor's grades from last year, they stink. It's that simple. We expected him to step up. Is he stepping up? Is he showing anything that tells you he's stepping up? I don't think so. Yeah, it's great that he put on bulk, that he wears number 1 now. He looks, all that. Yes, Dalton, we finished 14-3 last year. And hopefully we'll do the same or better this year. And we'll make it all the way and win the Super Bowl. Absolutely. But if you're talking about improving, Thielen is arguably the better wide receiver. And he would step into the wide receiver 3 role once Addison came back, in my opinion. Now, there are some cons. You talk about his age, 35. And yes, that is when most wide receivers have already fallen off the cliff. Most. I agree. Now, everybody wanted to compare, we need to get this 40-year-old quarterback. Why? Because Tom Brady could do it at 40. And I always hated that GOAT unicorn argument. But if you go with the GOAT unicorn argument, Jerry Rice at 35 had a miserable year because he blew his knee up at the very first preseason game. He came back in December and then blew his patella. But you know what he did in his 36-year season?
I don't know exactly. I know he played till he was 39.
Yeah, he caught almost 1,200 yards or more. Mm-hmm. I looked it up. He was comeback player of the year. He was another Pro Bowler. Again, at 36. So, if you want to say Adam Thielen has got the great genetics to hold up at that age, fine. I don't think I heard he's washed. He's slower than normal, yes, but he's smart. We already know that. So it is what it is. I just think if we're in a win now mode, I think he could help. Now, Anthony, give him a chance. Dave, give all these young guys a chance. Yeah. And let's see. Would you rather have something that's surefire? I've heard this argument all the time when I'm making it for J.J. McCarthy. And everybody, no, we need to bring in Aaron Rodgers. He hasn't thrown a pass. I get into this argument with Tyler all the time. He hasn't thrown a pass. He hasn't thrown a real game. Come on now. And Dalton, I'm not comparing him to Jerry Rice. I'm just comparing them to production of Jerry Rice. There are unicorns in the league. and it doesn't matter what position, is Adam Thielen one of those? He's already proven he's better than Naylor, in my opinion. Now, we could absorb the cost. It would take him wanting to – it would take, first off, Carolina agreeing to a trade and saying, hey, we understand you want to go for a championship. We'll entertain it. Blah. I don't think it's going to happen. But it would be cool to see, I would think. Now, there's the whole issue of his wife. I think Adam Thielen loved it in Minnesota, but hey, I think it would be an improvement to the squad.
And
T-Bass, how many people get compared to Tom Brady?
I think it's fine to use, to use X player did this when they were 36. So just to show it's not impossible that another player at 36 could produce. Is it likely? No. But again, if you look at Adam Thielen the previous 2 years, you would say you probably, I think a lot of people would think, well, even though he's turning 35, he's shown the previous 2 years that he could still be a productive wide receiver in the NFL on a team that isn't very good. Now, was he getting thrown the ball a lot because that's all Carolina had? Yeah, particularly in 2023.
Young could trust him. Yep.
Yeah, but still, his hands are very good. He knows how to get open. Is he going to catch a bunch of 30-yard, 40-yard passes on a consistent basis? Probably not. But he's a pro, and we've got a lot of guys on the Vikings wide receiver room right now who aren't pros, and by that means they have not proven that they can be consistently get open and catch passes and be a factor in an NFL game against starting players in the NFL, like Lucky Jackson, like Deshaun Jones, like Dante Fleming, like Miles Price, like all of these guys that played yesterday. And yeah, Lucky Jackson looks like he deserves to be given a shot, but NFL teams, particularly ones in win now, they like to go with the proven commodity. The proven commodity. And Adam Thielen, as of last year, was still a proven, productive NFL player, NFL wide receiver. Again, at his age, he makes me nervous. It feels like but there's pros. There are arguments to be made for bringing him in. Are the Vikings going to bring him in? Doesn't sound right now like they are even interested in that.
It's 100% hypothetical. Like I said, Hey, I think Amari Cooper scored better in the second half of his season last year than Thielen did. And he's 31. And he's out there, could be picked up today. Now, he doesn't have the experience with either JJ or with KOC, but he could be picked up today. Why hasn't he signed with a team? Is he asking too much? He's now at the point where it should be vet minimum plus incentives, in my opinion. But if you bring him in right, as in tomorrow, you could bring him up to speed, and that would be one solution. And I think it would work. But it's also egos. How are you going to feel when Addison's back on the field? Because he's clearly the wide receiver too.
Oh, yes.
But hey, and I appreciate the thumbs down. It's interaction. You guys rock. But like I said, this is a hypothetical exercise. It's all it was. Nothing to be all grumpy about. But
it's a good debate. And the back and forth, yes for Thielen, no for Thielen. That's all fun. It's all fun. Maybe it'll even become a point in the next couple of weeks where it's actually not speculation, but something that's actually out there and the Vikings are pursuing. I don't know about that, but yeah, fun to talk about.
Yes, T-Bass. I remember. And like I said, at 35, most have already fallen off the hill, much less hit it and going down the backside. All right. Now on to a lighter topic. Theme 3. Long-term position review, and we're going to talk about the running backs and the quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's our final installment of this segment of the show where we looked at the long-term outlook for all the Vikings positional units. And then doing that, I've been looking at their contract status, their age, how they've performed with the Vikings or their previous teams as well up to this point. And yeah, we've gone through everybody except the running backs and quarterbacks. So going to get at it today. And it's timely with the quarterbacks because we saw all 4 of them yesterday. But going to start with the running backs first, Dave. And you've got your nice slide up there, which showing the age and when guys are going to be available, how long they're under contract. Last week, I was pretty bullish on the long-term outlook of the Vikings offensive line. The running backs is almost reverse to that, in that the long-term outlook is not looking very uncertain, very cloudy. And the reasons why are because your number one running back, Aaron Jones, he's 30, which is ancient for a running back. He'll be 31 in late December, and he's only under contract for the Vikings up until 2026. And then your number 2 running back, or 1B running back, Jordan Mason, who, although he is 26, but he is also only under contract for up until 2026. So long-term, not a great place to be when you look at your top 2 running backs. One is Aaron Jones, who's very old for a running back and is only under contract for the Vikings 2 seasons. At his age, Dave, it seems very unlikely that the Vikings would extend him beyond 2026. I think once he gets to age 32 in late December, if he's even on the Vikings at that point, the Vikings aren't going to be interested in bringing him back because running backs at 32 usually don't age very well. And so I think the long-term outlook for Aaron Jones is he's here 2 years max. Jordan Mason, again, he's at 26. By the time he's a free agent, he'd be just in his 28th season. That again is at an age where running backs, the decline is starting to set in, and you have to make the
top of that.
Yes, but it could happen quite quickly that he drops off, like what happened to Dalvin Cook after he left Minnesota. And so with the Vikings, now first, Mason has to play really well in the 2 years that he is here to prove that the Vikings should consider extending him after 2026. But if he does, then they have a decision to make at his age, 28 for a running back. How long should that extension be if they're going to extend him? I would expect it, they might certainly entertain a 2-year deal just like they gave Jones this offseason, but it wouldn't be beyond that. And again, depending on how Mason plays, he looked pretty good yesterday in preseason, but depending on how he plays, maybe he doesn't even get that extension. So your top 2 running backs, pretty uncertain what their future is with the Vikings beyond 2026. And then you look at everybody else below that. Ty Chandler, surprisingly, is older than Jordan Mason, but he was an old rookie when he came into the league. We know Ty Chandler's spot on this team. He's in the last year of his rookie deal. He's going to be a free agent after this season. Certainly not assured of a roster spot even this year with the Vikings. And we saw yesterday that battle is in full tilt. Personally, I don't think that he's going to be a Viking beyond this season, even if he is a Viking beyond this season, even if he's a Viking this season. And then the other 2 guys, Zavier Scott, the guy we had on the practice squad late last year that we picked up from the Colts. And then there's the rookie Trey Stewart, the undrafted rookie free agent from Jacksonville State, who got a little bit of play yesterday, but not very much. Those are 2 guys. The Vikings do have them under team control up until the 2028 season, but remains to be seen. Again, they have to show that they're worth being the Vikings, keeping them around beyond that time. And we just don't know with those guys, whether that's going to be the case. Although Scott, again, did look pretty good yesterday. The final guy on there, CJ Ham, 32. Normally you wouldn't have a running back. He's listed as a running back, but we know he's basically an extra tight end offensive lineman, never carries the ball. He's set to be a free agent again after this season. Did the Vikings bring him back beyond this season? At his age, we know he doesn't cost much. We know he does a good job blocking. That's why he's there. He's a big core special teams guy. Perhaps the Vikings at this point, I think if they do extend him, it'd be on a 1-year deal every year beyond this. And I don't know if CJ Ham is going to be, I don't know if CJ Ham is going to be a Viking beyond this season. So you're looking at those running backs, Dave, everybody in the room. Again, long-term, we're not really set up very well there long-term. And the Vikings could have maybe handled this a little bit differently and had the long-term situation look a little bit differently. This past draft, it was a very, very deep running back draft, one of the deepest in recent memory. The Vikings chose not to draft a running back with the draft picks they had in that draft. So they made that decision. They ended up picking, Donovan Jackson and Ty Felton earlier in the draft, and then other guys later in the draft. Might not be a big deal because, certainly as long as Jones and Jordan Mason play the way they have in the past and stay healthy, that's a really good 1-2 punch at running back. And there's not going to be a lot of need for a running back, a running back 3. They aren't going to get a lot of snaps, a lot of carries. So there's certainly going to be potential for the Vikings to address this long-term by drafting a rookie in the 2026 draft or the 2026 NFL draft or the 2027 NFL draft. And then you have that rookie under team control for 4 years. And then your long-term outlook looks a bit different. There could be free agents that the Vikings are interested in and could sign for 2 or 3 years at that point too. We don't know about that. There is opportunities to address this, but at least right now, running back is again very cloudy on as far as the long-term outlook beyond 2026 of what we have there and how that running back unit is going to look in beyond 2026.
And your dog wanted to chime in on that too.
Yes, he's not happy that Chuck Foreman no longer can play.
I got it. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's going to be interesting to see who works out. Obviously, I think Mason's going to be possible. Let's see how he does. And then I think Aaron Jones will be the last once his contract's up. But we'll see. That brings us to the next group, QBs.
The quarterbacks. And long-term outlook here, let's be honest, it starts and ends with J.J. McCarthy, right? He won't turn 23 until January of 2026. He's under contract till 2028, but there's also a 5th-year option with that. So even 2029, really, he's under team control. But certainly if J.J. McCarthy proves this year and beyond that he is the guy, that he is the person who's going to be our next franchise quarterback, the Vikings are going to lock him up to a long extension. I would say in the 2027 offseason, probably. They're going to sign him to a long-term extension that keeps him a Viking into the 2030s. And then at that point, your long-term outlook at quarterback looks great because you've got your franchise guy and he's under team control for a long, long time. Now, if that doesn't happen, it totally changes the long-term outlook of the Vikings at the Vikings quarterback room because J.J. McCarthy, if he struggles this year, hopefully he does not, he's probably getting this year and next year to prove that, to solidify being the number one guy. But if he struggles this year and next, at that point, I think Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, then they're back to they got to look for another answer. We're back to signing bridge quarterbacks to 1-year deals. We're back to looking at the draft to see if we can find a promising guy to pick as our next franchise guy early in the draft. And that's a place we do not want to be in, Dave. And let's hope it does not happen, but it could happen. But again, long-term outlook of the quarterbacks, it really all depends on J.J. McCarthy at this point, because Sam Howell, yeah, he's young, but he's only under contract this year. Does Sam Howell want to stay with the Vikings, particularly if McCarthy shows that he's got the goods and be a backup his whole career behind McCarthy? He's not going to want to do that at 24. So beyond after this season, he's going to be looking for other opportunities, I would expect. Brett Rypien is Brett Rypien. He's a number 3 quarterback or a practice squad guy at best. Nice to have his depth, but again, will he be a Viking beyond 2025 or even in 2025? Not the way it looked yesterday. Max Brosmer. Now, here's the guy that, based again on the little I saw yesterday, very impressed with what I saw yesterday. He is the guy, along with McCarthy, who is under team control till 2028. He'd be a restricted free agent. Now he's 3 years older than JJ McCarthy, but he's the other guy who could really could help the Vikings' long-term outlook. Because if McCarthy is your franchise guy, but Brosmer shows that he's got the talent to develop as a backup and, marinate in the KOC system for a year or 2 or 3, and then he's ready to really take on snaps and can be a player who can be a quality player in the NFL if you need him. That's a great thing for the Vikings, because what they haven't been able to do, and something the Packers used to really do well back in the 90s when they had Brett Favre and Ron Wolf was the general manager. You remember how they groomed Brunell, and then they were able to trade him to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then they groomed Aaron Brooks, and they were able to, I think trade him to the Saints. And they had Hasselbeck, and they were able to trade him to the Seahawks, right? Like, they seem to always have this young developmental guy behind Brett Favre that didn't have to play, but they could use as trade bait later on and get assets. Brosmer, maybe he could be that guy. It's too early to tell, but he did show some really good things yesterday in the preseason. And if he can build on that and learn to be a pro, there is some promise there. And I think he could really help the Vikings long-term as being maybe your backup solution for a good extended amount of time. And also being a guy that, if McCarthy is the guy, that you can use Brosmer. Not only can he come in and play for McCarthy if he has to miss a game or two and keep you afloat and win you games, but if he shows that, he can also be a guy you could get a draft asset for in future years. And, I think when you're drafting a developmental quarterback, if they don't become your starter eventually and play lights out, the next best thing is you can trade them for, a pretty good draft pick in a future draft, if you feel that, if they've shown that they're good enough to warrant that from another team. So, but really, McCarthy is where the long-term outlook for the quarterbacks starts and ends. And I think Brosmer is the other hope. Do I think that he'll become an NFL starter? I'd never make that bet on an undrafted rookie free agent, Dave, and neither would you. It'd be a poor bet. But that is the best case scenario. And yesterday, his play showed that, at least there's some hope that that's the case. He certainly looked the part of an NFL quarterback, unlike the guy, Mertz, was it, from the Texans who played?
Oh, yeah.
Like you say, he's going to be selling. He's going to be selling insurance in a few weeks.
But the Favre Packers weren't the only team that developed and traded for picks. New England Patriots, when Tom Brady was quarterback, also did the same thing. And we remember Jimmy Garoppolo is still in the league. He's backup, but he's still in the league. He was one of those. But it would be nice to be able to do that. To not only have, Kevin O'Connell's school for reclaiming quarterbacks, he can reclaim them, send them off, so they get paid. And hopefully we get something for them if it's early, or develop the young guys and then trade them away so we can get benefits. That would be cool.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think Brosmer and JJ are the long-term answers as of right now. We'll see how the rest of the preseason goes. But we're just hoping that we get, that JJ will be the next Fran Tarkington for our squad.
Yes,
can I compare him to Fran Tarkington, T-Bass? in the respect that leader and franchise quarterback in that respect.
A guy you can plug in a quarterback and not really have to worry about it for a decade. That's what we're looking for.
Well, folks, that is it for the day. Darren still, I think, probably needs to finish packing.
Oh, I almost got that beat, Dave. Just got a couple of knickknacks. Did packing last night. Trying to pack light, even though I'm gone for 3 weeks. Norcius says he doesn't know what a vacation is.
Hey, I side with Norcius. There's very rarely that I take a vacation, if at all. But understand you take them for me, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, tomorrow we're going to have the real Forno. He'll be on his normal time, and he'll be talking about the game. Hopefully we'll have the film by then, and we can get to break it down even further, see what Delton saw, see what everybody else saw, and it should be good to see. That it's a good thing. And then we're just back to a normal week. We have the joint practices at the end of the week and the game next Saturday. Woohoo. Any last words there, buddy?
Well, I did want to mention, apparently, I don't think it's been officially named, but I did want to mention that Anthony Barr has retired from the NFL. He didn't play last year and wasn't getting any offers this year. So I guess he figured, got the hint that his services wouldn't be required anymore in the NFL. So it did want to mention that. And I think for some Vikings fans, Barr would be remembered. They remember him because Aaron Donald got picked after Anthony Barr got picked. And it's the old, if only we'd picked Aaron Donald instead of Barr, how much different might have things have gone. I don't know about that, but I always felt that Barr was a very good player. He was a key player on some pretty good Vikings defenses from 2015 until 2019. And he didn't end up being the pass rushing force that he was at UCLA, but the Vikings and Mike Zimmer didn't use Anthony Barr the way he was used at UCLA, where he was a 3-4 edge guy who was pretty much exclusively rushing the passer. So you can't look at his sack numbers and say Anthony Barr wasn't any good. I think he was a very good all-around linebacker, and it was a valuable player on a very good Vikings defense for quite a few years. And he's not going to make the Hall of Fame, but I don't think he was a wasted draft pick at all.
And he brought us a great new joke. What happens when Aaron Rodgers runs into a bar?
To the bar, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Hey, with that, what do we say, buddy?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby, and thanks for watching.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!